and let's just jump on in.
Perfect.
I will hit record now.
Excellent. So welcome everybody, and thank you for joining Mischa and I for this wonderful journey exploring taboos around, or taboos, is that how you say it in America? Taboos?
Yes.
Around men's pleasure. I do have a funky accent, so I frequently will use words in English that they are all versions of English, they're just not all American English. So do let us know if I use a word that doesn't make sense. And because I'm sure somebody will ask, my accent comes from a mixture of growing up in South Africa, spending time in London, Australia, New Zealand, and I've lived in the Bay Area for the last 15 years already. So Mischa, I know some of your audience is jumping on this Zoom, and my audience doesn't necessarily know you, so I'd love you to just share a little bit about who you are in the world and why you're passionate about men's pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And it's such an honor to be here with you, Caroline. I really couldn't state that enough times.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it really, really is. So I'm Mischa Byruck. I'm in San Francisco. And I'm the founder of Evolve.men, which is a brand that I am running. And I do workshops, I do coaching, I'm a certified life coach, and I do a lot of work around the intersection between men, masculinity, and sexuality. So when we talk about pleasure, I'm entering it through the topic through the lens of sexuality. I was doing something completely different 3 years ago. I was in the nonprofit world doing fundraising for technology-oriented nonprofits. I was the partnerships director at Code for America and at a company called DataKind before that. I have a Master of Public Administration degree from NYU. My undergrad's at Columbia. I've lived all over the world. I did a lot of international development work. And for the last few years, I've just had an awakening and oriented all of my work towards liberating manhood and impacting the national conversation around sex and sexuality and masculinity. And that started in large part with Me Too. And I started hosting workshops to support men confronting the patriarchy. And those really took off. And that was my original following and my original client base. And since then, I'm starting to do a lot more workshops around sexual liberation. And that's how I've come to know you and your reputation. And I think that catches us up.
Great. Well, one of the, I started paying attention to you long before we actually, I'm going to say met, because we've only met in virtual space so far. But really when I was seeing the heart-focused way you were supporting men and helping men to explore their shadow work. And from my perspective, one of our overlaps, aside from being passionate about supporting men, is this focus on using pleasure. And I like to use pleasure, not just for pleasure in itself, but pleasure as a tool for transformation. The focus of my practice is Neo-Tantra, and for those of you who don't know what that is, Neo-Tantra is a very dynamic form of embodied meditation, which sounds very serious, but it's really a lot of fun. So we use breath, we use pleasure, we use sacred sexuality as the way that we actually get to connect more deeply to ourselves, our partner or partners. And for me, it's a deeply spiritual practice. So I even bring the divine into that. I'm really excited today to join you in celebrating men's pleasure because, you know, in the ways we've been talking, and I felt like we wanted to just like bring everybody into the living room with us, right?
I know.
Have a chat. But so often it feels like there's actually a shaming, right, of men's pleasure, or a space where it's not okay for men's pleasure for them to have desires. So, you know, I run my energy in a very yang or penetrative way, but I feel very connected to being a woman. So why don't you speak to what that's like as a man and what you see with some of your clients?
Sure. I think this is absolutely a theme that I've experienced in men's circles across the spectrum of men from a huge variety of backgrounds, is a deep sense of shame at when expressing or even experiencing my own desire. Like there's a deep sense of like somehow my desire is banal and dangerous, especially in the wake of Me Too. I don't want to date this material too much, but like that's really where I've come into this work. And the overall kind of like subtle impression is my sexuality is dangerous. My sexuality is not a gift to the world so much as this kind of this beast to be dealt with. One of the classic examples I use in my workshops when supporting men to see this for the first time is to highlight the semantics of the ways that we talk about sex. We talk about banging. We talk about like these violent acts. We talk about even the way that we use fucking. Pornography, mainstream pornography tends to reflect this. A lot of it's very violent and banal. And then especially the way that we talk about masturbation, it's all of our euphemisms are choking or strangling or beating or jerking. There's these, right? There's nothing loving particularly about that. I don't say, it's just something very, very profound. Yeah, there's one other comment, but I want to pause there.
Well, I love it that you're bringing awareness even to the languaging, because I was on a call with a friend the other day, and she was referring to her genitals as junk.
Yeah.
And we've all heard that.
Yeah.
And I've stopped, in neo-tantric circles, we actually go back to the Sanskrit and we use words like lingam for a man's penis. And some people are like, oh, that's weird. Why are you doing that? But it brings the honoring back in, because lingam, one of the translations, is like a wand of light.
Yeah.
And as somebody who has had lingam, well, let's stick to one for now. But anyway, before I get too excited on this call. But when you had this, this very potent energetic transmission, or it's also a vajra, is like a diamond staff. It's a very powerful way that people can be penetrated. Mm-hmm. So when we go back to looking at shifting even the words that we use, I actually don't use the word masturbation at all, because the origins of that word mean to dirty one's hand. Yep. It still kind of blows my mind. So I tend to use words. I've been using self-pleasuring. Totally. And I've also been hearing a lot, especially more recently, of the word solo sex. Yeah. And I love
that. I love solo sex.
So we're reclaiming that. Please continue.
Oh, no, absolutely. I'm really glad that you're bringing that up. One of the things I've found about the word self-pleasure is that this actually leads into the second point I wanted to make. There's a taboo around men aren't allowed to experience pleasure in our society. Men are allowed to experience rewards for having won capitalism, like, right? The idea of truly relaxing into a state of pleasure feels somehow like hedonistic or wrong, or like I'm not like doing right by the world. Like there's something that I should be doing more or better, or this is somehow wrong, or a waste of time and life. And my value to the world is my work, right. not my pleasure or my desire. And I feel like there's a huge shift there in actually honoring men's pleasure, not just because, oh, that's nice, but because it actually is a gift to the world.
And how do you see it as a gift to the world? We can say that, but what does that tangibly mean?
Because I'm connecting men's pleasure to the expression of desire, and the expression of desire as the erotic kind of perspective on the driving force of the masculine and the creative force, the activation of the women around us, the leadership energy, the putting energy and action into the world energy. And that's actually a huge gift to the world.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that I often say to people, you know, I can certainly teach people how to quadruple their orgasms, for example. Right. And it's one of the things I love doing. And as we're empowering people to feel more empowered through their pleasure and through their eros, you said the most amazing thing today. I just want to say this. The eros in this moment is not sex, but is not in sex, but is in connection.
Yeah.
And in this time where many of us are having to practice solo sex to be safe if we don't live with a partner, like what a wonderful way to come back to self and connecting to ourself and our desires. But having this space where we feel empowered in the bedroom, we can actually take that, I'm going to use words like energy because I'm into all the woo, but we take that energy, or Neo-Tantric would say that Shakti, and we take it out into the world. So when you're going to ask for a raise from your boss, or you've got to go and have a difficult conversation, when you feel empowered through your own connection with your self-pleasure or connection with another, you're going to come from a very different place of empowerment if you're already feeling like a rock star in the bedroom.
And again, there's a distinction here, which is the rock star comes from owning your own pleasure and your presence, not from having performed or worked to like check off the boxes of like, did I give her XYZ thing? Did I perform? Did I like do my duty? Did I, please everybody else? Right. And so often rock star in the bedroom evokes this like, oh, it's just a different kind of work, right? Like I just have to get an A and like have the approval of every one of my partners and be, reaffirmed and affirmed, so just bringing it back to this idea of like the sanctity and divinity of just the pleasure itself, not the performance.
I love hearing that. A few years ago, I was dating somebody, and I'm going to share some personal experiences that I hope won't be too explicit for our audience. But I remember saying to him, I enjoy taking you in my mouth at all stages, whether you have a soft on or a hard on. Mm-hmm. And he very vulnerably said to me one night, he said, it's never been safe for me to show up with a woman. And we're using heterosexual language right now, but obviously this conversation is open to all genders and all kinds of sexual orientation. But he said, I always feel like I have to be hard the minute I get naked in front of a woman. Mm-hmm. And we actually worked together for a while in our, in the evolution of our relationship, just for him to feel safe enough. Because I wasn't running that story.
Yeah.
And I see so often, and I think for anybody who's on this that either works with men or loves being in pleasurable spaces with men, to create enough safety so that we are also not expecting them to perform. I mean, I know I've certainly been guilty in the past of saying like, harder, fuck me harder. And like, that is hot. And it also can add a lot of pressure. And I learned that in one of my private sessions when, I was working with a guy who had challenges maintaining an erection.
Yeah.
Some of you might know that as erectile dysfunction. I don't like those words, but that's sort of what it's known for in the mainstream. And like, it would literally make him get in this head more than the head of his cock, because he was so worried about having to perform and show up as the man instead of being able to just be where he was at.
There is, and I really want to, if I may, Caroline, building on the topics that you've just said, I want to invite the audience to put in some of the things that they thought of when they heard this topic, the taboos around male pleasure. I'd be really interested to see what the people in this room think about when they think about a taboo around male or men's pleasure. And just to do a gut check to see if we're talking about the things that the audience had on their mind. Is that okay?
Yeah, love that. And they can put that in the chat window, right?
Yeah, just go ahead and put it in the chat to everyone, and we'll just kind of build off of that as the topics come in. Thank you, Ian. And so one of the things I really wanted to bring up actually about this moment, as well as in general, I've been doing a lot of thinking around what are the ways that collective or group activities, when facilitated well, can, through pleasure, help to break down some of these barriers, much in the same way that I'm seeing priestess circles and self-pleasuring circles amongst women, but I'm seeing far comparatively fewer amongst men. I know a number of different gay communities that do like essentially like circle jerk get-togethers, which is really fascinating to me, where they either are stroking themselves, or sometimes stroking each other, but that's actually the limit, which is really interesting. I'm really interested in collective pleasure experiences for straight men that don't necessarily put them in a place of forced homosexual interaction.
Right. If that's not
like,
the frame, right?
Which I really have a huge amount of respect of not doing. But at the same time still allow men to access solidarity and mutual affirmation through pleasure. And the place that I found this most able to be achieved is through sex parties, where mostly hetero sex parties, where the men are adjacent to each other, but experiencing pleasure in front of other men, which I think is does a huge amount to normalize men's pleasure. And create spaces where, for instance, like men would feel, I know a lot of men who go to sex parties might still identify as straight, but are far more comfortable with male on male touch that isn't necessarily sexual. And so they've broadened the ways that they can interact pleasurably with men and source their own pleasure through brotherhood without it necessarily needing to be explicitly sexual.
Right. Well, I love what you're saying, because I always think it's a funny thing whenever I suggest to a partner, oh, it'd be great to have a threesome. Often they're most interested in a female with female male, and while I'm certainly open to that, I much prefer male female. And so one of the questions I often ask, I don't need them to be gay or bi or even queer, but like, are you okay? Like if his shoulder brushes up against
right,
you, like,
right.
Is that okay?
Kind of not.
What's that? Well, for some guys, that would totally freak them out. But I notice it helps so much if they're just okay. If a bit touches a bit, it doesn't mean they have to like make out, right? Or be super sexual with each other, but just being comfortable in the space.
My experience is that, so the place that I take that to in my interactions when I'm in that situation personally is I establish a real safe space with the other man of like brotherhood, you know? Yeah. So it's going to be like, we're like hands on each other's shoulders kind of thing. Like we're like brothers in this, you know? And I actually find that like this element of like brotherhood goes really well with group sex, because it's actually a space of like safety and connection.
Right.
Where like I'm taking out the possibility that Mischa's going to try to like make a move on me or some shit because he's bi. You know what I mean? Like I'm actually establishing a safe zone where like we can both be sexual in our sexual bodies and not have to fear, frankly, each other, and feel really safe being like hard next to each other as straight men.
Right. I love hearing that, because it also then takes the performance pressure out of it. You just celebrating being there with each other without it having to be a competition. Or again, I work with a lot of men that worry about the size of their penis and whether they're going to be hard or not. And the reality is, for men over 45, it is more challenging to stay hard. And again, this is where Neo-Tantra can be very helpful, because there are lots of techniques that you can learn to support people without needing medication. So I can see you paying attention to the chat window, which is great, because people are bringing.
I'm trying to pay attention to both, but yeah, what I'm noticing is that there's lots of interest in, in exactly what you're talking about, non-hard pleasure, being okay, and as well as just the very idea of men's pleasure being itself a taboo in some way, because so much of the economy feels geared towards men pleasure, but, and I really want to just draw this point out, right? Strip clubs, escort services, phone sex lines, you know, the entire sex work industry, you know, including its seedier and truly awful parts, right? The child sex rings, et cetera, seem, or at least at the surface, to be geared towards men's pleasure. So what is the source of the taboo? And of course, to me, it's the patriarchal definition, the reductive definition of what men's pleasure is. When you start actually talking about the men's pleasure as something with breadth and nuance and passivity and inherent femininity and performativeness and sensitivity, those are where, to me at least, the taboos tend to come in.
Well, it's something that's been interesting in meeting this moment. I live alone, and I just ended a relationship. So I don't have somebody I can safely be having, in-person sex with. Yeah. But I have been having, and this I don't do with students, just to be very clear, because I will get requests after this. This is in my private life, but I want to share very openly with you guys, well, with everybody who's on the call, that exploring virtually, one of the things that stood out for me in the dates that I've been having is I've actually noticed the men really seeking heart connection first before they even feel safe enough, which is great. Like, in general, I think that makes all of us, regardless of our resonant gender, feel safe to explore. And there's a way I'm noticing, like, I normally have a really hard limit around being naked on video or doing video, even though we're going to talk about phone sex in a bit, and I love phone sex. Me too. I love phone sex. But, you know, video's always been an edge. And right now I'm noticing that video's actually creating safety. Mm-hmm. There's a way where I don't have to screen as heavily. I don't have to, because I'm safe in my home and I can connect with somebody on the screen. But if I haven't felt unsafe, but if I did, I could literally just press a button and we can be done. Yeah. So I want to address, we've had a great question two great questions about how we can explore pleasure without having to have an erection or to be hard. Sure. And I want to give the people that are tuning in a really easy tip. So for those of you, I already referenced that you could have your partner use their mouth, which can be pleasurable to both of you. And especially mouth around lingam or mouth around your cock. I'm sharing that because, for one, especially if somebody is worried about anything being too large in their mouth, having a soft on, and notice the language I'm using, the soft on, in Taoist circles, they actually call it the sleeping giant. Mm-hmm. Which I love, right? There's something a little romantic about that. But taking somebody into your mouth is going to be pleasurable for the giver and the receiver, and you can be connecting into how good the sensations feel. And I really invite my students to let go of the goal and be with as much pleasure as they can give themselves permission to have. Because often the more attached people get to being erect or having an orgasm, that actually chases it further away. Yep. Another thing, if you are fluid bonded with a partner, is, and you can have either partner driving, and you could use this either on a yoni, either on a vulva, or I'm imagining you could use this anally too with enough lube, but just using the cock kind of almost like a paintbrush, right? And I can speak more effectively to this being done on a yoni, but it feels wonderful. There can be so much pleasure that's happening there. Yeah. The only reason we actually really need the erection is if we're going to penetrate something. Yep. But if we're not, you actually don't have to be hard. And sometimes it could either be the penis owner or the person on the receiving end actually guiding the lingam. So that's one way. Was there anything you wanted to say about that before I'm excited to talk about more pleasure too.
I love that idea, the paintbrush. Fabulous.
It's so good. So now we connected to the feeling. I mean, and some lube if you need it, right? Now we're just connecting to how good it feels. And our genitals actually are connecting. in a beautiful way. And often, because now we're just in the pleasure, the erection can start emerging, and then who knows which direction the play will go in.
I wanted to come back to the possibilities of virtual sex
Great.
that are created, in part because so much of men's pleasure is defined by the thrusting, penetrative, hard masculine, active, directed thing. What I'm finding, especially now in this current moment, but in general with phone or video sex, is that being at a physical remove does a number of things. But one of them is that it creates an inherent performative invitation. Now, in phone sex, traditionally, especially in heterodynamics, it's usually the man doing the talking and the woman doing the moaning. Okay.
Right? What
right.
do you know?
Traditionally.
Oh.
But like in the, you know, in a video, what I love is that there's this inherent invitation to the men to now be in front of the camera, right? And we all know that there's a very masculine element in being behind the camera, right? I am watching, I'm looking, I'm the one watching the woman perform or dance for me or strip for me, you know, and that's a very reassuringly masculine, feminine, traditional dynamic. But now we've got men who are just as likely to be in front of the camera. And now I have to perform, I have to dress up. Maybe I should wear makeup. Maybe I should learn how to dance. Maybe like, oh, what's this feeling like of like people watching me and me needing to turn them on with my body or my moves or my presence. And actually, I think that that's a massive taboo exploration happening right now in virtual sex parties, but also just in the increased likelihood that people are going to be dating virtually.
Right.
The other thing that I think is really, I just wanted to mention this, the other thing that I think is really interesting and anti-patriarchal about this moment is that if you're dating using a webcam, you can't be, there's no way to buy, unless you're literally paying for your webcam date, there's no way to buy her an expensive dinner or buy her a bunch of stuff. There's no economy here, you know? So the date isn't mediated by like how much I can show off money or like demonstrate wealth in some way, or, you know, or like perform those other things that happen in the context of dating. So we're just left with presence. We're just left, and it's not just it's not just conversation. It is presence, and we're also, there's no kind of like, well, I took her out for a date and now I'm expecting a blowjob or something, you know, like that's not a thing. There's not going to be any physical activity here. So if you're dating, there's like this invitation to date for presence and for communication and for like, or for juicy kind of like more creative phone sex or virtual sex, which I think is just such a juicy opportunity for single people right now.
Right. And for people that are, you know, in relationships when they're doing it long distance, or if you've got kids and you can't have your partner over on that night, right? You can still have sexy time. And I love, you've got a class coming up that we'll talk about in a bit on phone sex, but I love that because seducing with one's voice.
Yeah.
Either with the intonation or the words that we are using. I tend to I really love seduction and extending that out, whether you're doing it through text message, getting ready for the date, or I love to talk even when I'm in person having sex with somebody, not about the grocery list or the toilet that needs being unclogging, needs to be unclogged. But yeah, talking about their body. This was a wonderful thing that happened recently on a date for me. The guy went into detail about the parts of my body that he was enjoying. And there were some I'd heard before. You know, you imagine people like your breasts or whatever. But he talked about like the small of my back. And it's a view I don't see. So even just offering those appreciations is really going to open up your partner's willingness to be a yes, potentially, to some more edgy things you might ask for down the line. So can we, just because I know time is already, because we had some technical difficulties, it's already galloping away. Can I speak a little bit to the anal pleasure? Because I know that's a taboo.
Oh, I was so hoping that you'd go there.
Thank you. I love the way you just... See, he's an expert, you guys. Go and take his class because he'll teach you how to do smart things like planting that. Now I'm blushing. So one of the things that I've so misunderstood in the beginning was when the concept of anal sex was brought up. I thought that meant deep anal fucking.
Mm-hmm.
And for people, that can be intimidating.
Yeah.
But what I learned actually years ago, I offered my body for science to people that were training in a practice developed by Joseph Kramer called sexological bodywork. Very good at giving feedback, so I could give great feedback. And when they had to do practice some of the anal strokes, a lot of the strokes actually were even outside of the anal cavity. Now, there are a lot of nerve endings right there. Look, we're even doing a demo, even though we're socially distancing, right? Mm-hmm. So what's lovely about that is I would invite getting really descriptive about what kinds of things you might enjoy about anal pleasure. Because, balls, I'm going to be quite crude, but like balls deep in someone's ass is a level of intensity that not everybody is a yes to, but using a well-lubed finger on the outside with a glove maybe, using a tongue for rimming if you're into that. Those are much more delicate ways to start inviting an exploration versus, I see this in the kink community all the time. I feel like there's this dynamic where some people think the only way they can dom you is by fucking you in the ass. And I'm like, wow, that's so uncreative. Like, really? There's so many ways, but to really give yourself permission to share maybe a range of options and start slowly, even if you do want to ultimately get to the balls deep, the more pleasure that we're putting on the table for everybody involved. And what do you say? You have a wonderful saying about rolling out the red carpet for no's. Tell us more about that quickly. I love that.
Oh, could I? I just love this concept. So the rolling out the red carpet for the no is a concept that I've been developing for the last year or two, where it's a kind of going beyond consent concept where I'm inviting heterosexual men to develop their interest in the people that they're trying to have sex with enough as human beings such that they respect and even want their no as much as their yes. Right? So this moves us beyond even enthusiastic consent, where when you receive a no, you're expected to tolerate it. Whereas what I'm inviting is an actual proactive celebration of a no. When I get a no, it's like, thank you. That's awesome. I don't presume, I hate it when people say like, thank you for taking care of yourself, because I find that actually very presumptive. But maybe it's like, yeah, I'm just not into you, but like, whatever. I really love the idea of like one of the beautiful gifts that a man can give is subverting the patriarchal script that says like, I've just been going for it until you put up a block. And anything in the consent realm, even enthusiastic consent, is still playing into that paradigm. As in like, I'm just going for it. Oh, okay, cool. Like, I guess not, but maybe later, which I like totally understand, but like the safety and trust and real kind of like transcendent beauty that a man can create by welcoming and celebrating a woman's no, but not just tolerating it or accepting it, but celebrating it, rolling out the red carpet for it, saying like, of course, like right here, thank you so much for that no, is so juicy. I also really want to roll out the red carpet for men's no's. Like there's one of the taboos that we haven't mentioned yet around male pleasure is men taking pleasure in activities that might not be what they are expected to take pleasure in. Men even taking the time and the energy. Like I think there's a huge taboo. When I apprenticed last year with Destin Garrick, who's really been doing this work for 2 decades that I'm just coming into the last 2 years. The hurdle that the men in the conscious self-pleasuring course that he runs, the biggest hurdle is the willingness to take the time to self-pleasure.
Right.
That's it. It's just getting over the hurdle that I deserve pleasure, that my body is something to be celebrated, that I can love on my body, that I don't need the linearity of moving towards ejaculation to get rid of stress or get myself ready for sleep. I don't need the toxic kind of infiltration of pornography, that I can actually just celebrate my body. That's the hurdle. All the technique stuff comes way after. The big hurdle is just getting men to lie down on their bed for 20 minutes and touch themselves in a way that feels good.
Yeah.
Because that's the real taboo.
Well, I love, firstly, I so much good stuff here, but I really love, if you guys notice, the way Mischa was talking about the heart and the presence he brought to this rolling out the no. Because I often say, like, presence, I'm about to say something crude, presence gets my panties wet. And it's so true. If you get present with a partner, the ability for you both to actually be in heart space and connecting more than just your genitals, connecting all parts of self, which I believe is ultimately more fulfilling for everybody, is just so much broader. But I also love what you're saying about really getting in touch with your own pleasure and giving yourself the space to explore your own pleasure, because thank you so much for your comment, Erin. If we don't even understand our own bodies and our own pleasure, how do we begin to even ask for what we want or need? And I see this so often. It's one of the things I work on with people in my private sessions, is giving them the permission. I still have my boundaries, and there are things that I do and don't do in session. Like, I don't have intercourse in session, and don't offer oral sex, or I don't kiss in session. But as I'm inviting them to be in the eros, they can say anything. They can express that desire for anything, because the desire is beautiful.
Yeah.
But it's edgy. It's vulnerable for all of us to say, I want. And I often, there's a little formula I'll give people just as we, because we're going to have to wrap up soon. I know you have a 2:30. We're clearly going to have to do more of these, right? Because there's like, you guys have been asking such great questions.
Run to somewhere to get there by 3, so I can go over by 5 minutes. So we just
okay, great. I wanted to honor our agreement that we'd made.
But I do appreciate you respecting my previous hard stop requirement. But like, it's okay. It's not that hard. It's like.
Thank you for making it possible to not be that hard on this video, Mischa. But when I'm pretty good about knowing what I like in my body and being able to ask for it. But that is a vulnerable thing. And normally our partners, when they're giving to us, are really wanting to do a good job. And, especially, I often see men in the giving role, right? But if you're giving and giving and giving, but it's not really working for your partner, well, then nobody's winning, right?
Yeah.
So one of the formulas I use is always offer some kind of an appreciation. And, if it's really bad, I always think there's something to appreciate. So you can even just say, thank you for touching me, or thank you for being here with me. And then say, I'd love it if you move a little to the left, slow down. That's like a top thing I hear all the time, slow down. I'd love it if you slow down, instead of making people wrong for having their desires or their wishes. So that's something we can take away as we go.
Erin had a question I wanted to just circle back to, just because it was pretty specific about the rolling up. The thing that you're celebrating when a woman tells you no is the trust that she's put in you, that you will receive that no and still be interested.
Ah, yeah. Oh, that's huge, actually. Wow. So that she will still be interested, you will still be interested, even if your partner has said no. Yeah. I'm touching on that because I'd invited this new person I was dating to come to a workshop of mine. I don't really want to teach on my downtime. So I said, if you want to learn these things, then come and be a student, right? And in the end, he chose not to come, there's my interesting use of words, not to attend. And he was very nervous about telling me no. And it made absolutely no difference to me whether he was there or not. I was going to teach anyway. But he thought I would stop dating him because of that. And I love what you said about thanking someone. Barbara Corellis from Urban Tantra teaches this as well. Whenever somebody gives you feedback, just saying thank you. There's no value judgment in the thank you. But yeah, it's a way of honoring that boundary too.
Deeply, and welcoming it, and saying explicitly, like, I am not going to react to this as in, like, I'm now going to abandon you. I am now going to take away all interest, right? Because the message that sends is, I'm going to break down your barriers until you give me a yes, which is the whole problem with the entire consent conversation is like assuming like this battering ram that like, the door has some say now in giving into, like, which is just such a reductive, if nothing else, it's just such a reductive idea of men's sexuality and pleasure. No problem, Erin. I'm so glad. Thank you for the question. Yeah.
I noticed with a new partner once that when I actually got to the place, I tend to wait a long time for intercourse because with Neo-Tantra, there's such a broad range of where we can explore. I want to enjoy every aspect. And I also notice my level of attachment goes up incrementally when I move to intercourse. So I tend to wait on that to make sure the person is ready to attach to me. Anyway, and when I said, okay, great, I'm ready, he actually said, we've had a difficult conversation tonight, and I don't want you to say yes to me now. I think we should wait. I think we should wait. And we waited. It was quite sweet to watch his excitement because our next date, which was like 2 weeks later, he came ready with the condoms ready, and he still said, look, there's no rush. If you we don't have to even go there. I just, I came ready with some supplies. I felt so incredibly honored that he was willing to slow down. I was already at my yes, but I felt very seen and very honored. And it actually set the tone for us taking our connection, our sexual connection, even deeper. So one of the things I've noticed about intimacy as well, Mischa, is sometimes even these moments that could cause conflict can actually take us into even deeper levels of intimacy together, which ultimately in the end makes the sex, in my opinion, even better.
Absolutely. I love what Dominique just said. Respect makes me wet. So appreciating that, Dominique. It's so real.
Yes, it does. Totally. So we are going to have to wrap up soonish.
We could maybe,
And I've actually been saving some of the questions here because we're going to have to schedule another one, I think, because you do have this hard stop. So, and hopefully we'll have the text so that it streams on Facebook better that time. But I want people to be able to come and learn from you. And I know you have an amazing offering coming up.
I do. So I've been just so honored and thrilled to, I'm calling it phone sex, but just between us on this little chat, phone sex is the hook. But what I'm really teaching is virtual presence. I mean, I'm teaching all sorts of phone sex techniques, but like what I'm teaching is how to just be present.
Yeah.
And it's really a powerful medium right now to teach it virtually, because I can teach you to inhabit the exact same space, which is alone in your apartment, that you would be inhabiting if you were to engage in phone sex with your partner.
Yeah.
So there's this reality of the teaching environment that's not usually reflected if I'm, leading a sexuality workshop and everyone's in chairs and not in bed with each other. So that's been really juicy. I'm in, next week on Thursday evening, I'm hosting a kind of more advanced phone sex and practice offering, which is on my website and on Facebook, on my evolve.men Facebook page. And then as well, the following week, I'm continuing to offer courses on kind of the phone sex 101, if that's still a new thing. In addition, I'm experimenting with virtual communal sex formats in a really respectful way. And like, what does it look like to all be in sensual presence together with the safety and potentially anonymity created by these remote distancing. So that's what I've been up to. And that's what I've just been finding an absolute passion and joy for it, for these safe spaces for connection and sensuality. What about you? What do you got coming up?
Thank you. Well, yeah, one of my favorite things is to get my hands on people's bodies and to be in rooms with people. And right now that's not possible. So I love meeting in virtual spaces like this. And I'm noticing really profound shifts that can happen for people in my one-on-one coaching sessions, which we can do via video. And it really creates the space to dive in much more fine detail to what people's individual challenges are. And then, working with me one-on-one can be an investment. So I want to honor that people may not be able to invest as much in that right now. But coming to a class I'm running, I'm doing it on Saturday, April 18th, called My Monkey Mind Makeover. It's going to help to shift people out of their heads and into their bodies, and to learn to de-stress during this time, to find grounding. If you want to be present, you've got to learn how to ground. But also, I'm going to be teaching a breathwork practice to help people be able to last longer. So if you want to be able to last and have great stamina with your partner, in Neo Tantra, we teach a technique called ejaculation control, which can ultimately lead to mastery. So for example, when I fuck my partners, we play for 5 hours, 5 minutes. So if you're interested in learning more about that, literally I've got 8 more tickets that are only $10. I don't even normally teach this workshop, Monkey Mind Makeover, outside of my retreats. So it's a real treat. And we'll make sure we pop the links in the chat below for people. And we'll also put them on Facebook.
That would be so great if you wanted to put the chats, because you've got all the links.
I do. I'm going to
put. In the meantime, why don't we take these last 5 minutes and just open it up to people to ask some questions and just insert the kinds of things they'd like us to speak to. Thank you for the infos in the chat. But, we'll just extend by 5 minutes and just allow people to put them in the chat. I know that we've already asked for some questions. Anything else that people want us to speak to, I'd love to invite that. Okay. Or get more information on. We touched on a lot of wonderful topics today. It's so great. Nope.
Thank you. I'm trying to read and hold space. Yeah. That's a little challenging. Why don't I let you read, and I'm going to just speak to something really wonderful that Mischa did before you guys got on the call with us. And I'm really enjoying getting to know him, even in these virtual spaces. But we were talking about how we run the tech, and just like he just did there, he stopped and he took a moment. This man gets into his heart in such a beautiful way. And he said to me, I don't want to be so distracted with the tech that I'm not able to be present, for the conversation we're having. And I'm highlighting that because it's very potent. The presence. One of my friends, Julia Tyndall, wrote a book called Your Presence is Enough. And there's so much. It's really that potent if you can just be present. It helps your pleasure expand more. It helps you be more connected to yourself and to your partner. So I just wanted to honor that as you were looking through through some of the questions. So.
Well, I think testicular massage is so much more your field.
Great. I actually love this. I don't think I've ever been asked this question. We had somebody ask if we could speak to testicular massage and pleasure, and the importance of that it's not just, the shaft of the penis. And this is one of the ways in exploring, seeing more people get excited about that. But as you explore your own body and what you like, it makes it so much easier to then communicate that to a partner. Now, I think for many people that don't have penises, we don't want to do anything that might hurt you or hurt it, or, you know. So being able to share very simple feedback, like, I'd love it if you would, you know, I like my nails. So I often use my nails very lightly at first, but start off very lightly, and you could lightly tug or lightly just stroke, and then watch for your partner's feedback. You can do that with words, saying firmer, harder, deeper, more to the left, more to the right. But you can also use a number scale. And you can use that, say, in terms of pleasure. And one I often say on the pleasure scale is like, as if you'd rather be watching Netflix, and 10 is, oh my God, don't stop. So, you know, that's just a way. It's not a judgment of the person's skill. It's just giving everybody feedback.
Can I jump on that?
Sure.
Because it's so interesting. So much of what you're talking about is communication and presence and sensation. My experience of testicular massage and pleasure, as well as soft cock, is that the first, like the big rounds of pleasure are not sensation oriented at all. They're spiritual or emotional. They're about, this human being is like witnessing my genitals in a way that's loving and appreciative and critically non-utilitarian. Because I very much understand that my cock is very good when it's hard and can do a thing. But like when my cock is honored, or my balls are honored just because, like when they're cupped or held with honor, like without needing to function or do a fucking job, like that is so deep, and like, it allows me to relax so much. Yeah.
Sounds like the being with, right? Being with your partner's body, including their genitals. So I teach a lot of stillness, actually. In my work, and I work a lot with stillness in my private sessions as well. So I love it that you've brought that in. But just to help your partners know, like, oh, I'm not going to out the person's name, but I am worth attention and appreciation when I'm not doing anything. I love that you highlighted that. Thank you. But sharing with your partner that you would like this thing, you would like your balls to be included in the experience, right? Because your partner's mouth, they might not know. Maybe they haven't tried that before. I'm a pleasure expert, and I teach around sexuality all the time. I'm always learning. So you can help make not only the sex the two of you share together, but things for whether they're polyamorous or not, but for their future partners or their other partners, you can help make it okay for everybody to explore. And as you give yourself permission to ask, that also gives them permission to ask. So that may be a good point to end on today. We have loved your questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to everything today. I have loved getting to know you through prepping for this call, Mischa. And one of the things we said in prepping that we haven't said that feels important is, in the whole era of Me Too, and in some ways, we're not in the big peak of it, but things are still coming out. Right? And I think it's important that that's happening. But there has to be a way for people to walk back into places of pleasure and connection and have that celebrated. And I love the fact that you are a stand, especially for men in the world, to create spaces where that's okay. And that's really important to me too. So thank you to everybody who's joined on the call. Thank you. I'm watching him have Kriya's, which is energy moving through his body. It's getting me all excited now. We didn't talk about doing more post this, but I can certainly see there's interest. So Mischa and I will look at that. Yeah, please feel free to pop. Oh, you joined us from Johannesburg. That's South Africa. I was born there. Wonderful. Thank you all so much for joining us. And, you know, I send a lot of free tips and tools and videos out on my newsletter, and I'm putting private videos only on my Patreon. So we'll make sure you have all of those links, and we look forward to connecting with you all again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for the appreciations.
Okay, bye,
right.
Karen.
Mwah.
Bye, Dominique. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. We'll see you guys all soon.
Bye, all.
Again.
I'm gonna shut it down. Okay.
That's great. Thank you, Mischa. Bye.
Bye, all.